Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Discover New Music podcast from us at Pelt Music. Shortly, we'll be joined by Blake Cateris to talk about his latest single, Days, Weeks, Months and Years, which we've featured recently over on our Discover New Music playlist on Spotify. But before then, the usual reminders from myself. If you would, please do follow Pelt on social media. We are on Facebook at Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Pelt Music. And again, if you would, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, wherever you're watching or listening. Well, welcome, Blake, to the Discover New Music podcast. Absolutely delighted to have you on. How are you on what I believe is a fine morning for you over in Australia?
Yes, it's about 6 a.m. on Thursday. I've got a cup of coffee. And because it's summer, the sun's about rising about 5:30, so it's coming through, and it's crazy how it does that. But yeah, loving life, in for a big day. I thought I'd start it off with a podcast.
Yeah, what better way to start it off, hey? Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I imagine the most important thing right now is that cup of coffee giving you, say, a 6 a.m. over there.
Beautiful, liquid,
Yeah.
black gold.
Oh, look at that. I am slightly envious. But of course, over in the UK, it's almost our bedtime, so I better not be drinking too much coffee.
That would be a mistake. I mean, I don't have insomnia, but I imagine that was what it would feel like if I had a coffee at 7 p.m. and just lying in bed for another 12 hours.
Exactly. Best avoided. But obviously, yeah, absolutely delighted to have you on the podcast. So we've featured Days, Weeks, Months and Years, your most recent single on our playlists, obviously. So we're going to talk to you about that in just a moment. But regular listeners will know the first portion of this podcast is always the same. It's the Discover New Music podcast. So hopefully it's for people to discover new music they're not familiar with, and therefore artists that they're not already familiar with. So we always start off with what we call the origin story. So, how, Blake, did you arrive at the destination you find yourself in now, releasing music under your name and in the folk punk stylings? I think you've got a bit of a history there in the Sydney punk scene. So if you could let us know your origin story.
Well, destination, yeah. I've done a lot of work on rearranging my thinking away from focusing more on the journey instead of the destination, because that way I don't turn into a big anxious ball of mess. So life is a big long journey of self-improvement, and you're like that to the day you die. Really, there's no destination. But how I arrived where I am right now, I've been playing music since I was like 5 years old.
Wow.
My mum was a music teacher, so that was like within the house often. And then I joined a few bands in high school, or joined a band in high school, and they introduced me to cool rock music as opposed to like the music my dad would listen to, which is still, to me, it's still cool, but it's like, it's a bit older. And after high school, coming out of high school, I met a bunch of people that would hang around in like Sydney creative circles that were very much into punk and rock, and it was all downhill from there, really. And so where I'm at now, I've done a bunch of stuff. I've been through like Southeast Asia touring with bands that were like in that heavy kind of hardcore or like post-hardcore pop punk kind of side of things. I don't know. We have a bunch of clubs around in Australia that kind of like specialize. I'm sure you guys do too. But our guitarist is Filipino, so he just acted as our tour manager and took us through the Philippines and Indonesia and stuff, which was a lot of fun. I've been to LA to play as a bass player, to play with the band over there, record and do a tour around California, and touching into Arizona and Vegas and stuff like that. I've done a lot. It's been a good journey so far, and the journey continues after this. So where I'm at right now with my songwriter stuff is I've kind of just got to a point where I started to really become interested in that side of stuff, and discovering like those songwriters, a lot of which used to play in punk bands, and I was like, oh, there's a bit of similarity here. And a lot of them seem to originate from the UK, which is got me thinking. And yeah, so this song that I have, Days, Weeks, Months and Years, It was born out of, I started writing it through lockdown. Because before lockdowns, before like the world went crazy and stuff like that, I was working. I was just my job was just starting to pick up. Like, music's my job, freelance musician, and the jobs and the work just started to roll in. And I found like I was often like called in to do stuff on Friday and Saturday nights, and then I open my phone, go on Instagram stories, and like all my friends were at a party or at a gig that I really wanted to be at, but I can't be because I'm on the other side of Sydney. And it was this real dilemma for me because I was doing what I loved, but I was also like just looking at like how green the grass was on the other side. And then after lockdowns, work just exploded. Surprisingly, like people, I mean, not surprisingly, people just couldn't wait to get back to it. And just the work would just flow in, and I was just saying yes to everything because I hadn't worked for so long. And that exacerbated this feeling inside of me. And days, weeks, months, and years was born out of that. It was more of a frustration of feeling stuck. Like, yes, this is what I want to do, but why am I so unhappy? And there was room for a lot of self-reflection, and trying to figure out how to alleviate this unhappiness. And yeah, so it's basically about feeling stuck, this song.
Yeah, and obviously, I think a lot of us felt that during the pandemic years. It felt stuck for sure.
I mean, we, for Sydney, it was shit, but I can't begin to understand the plight of the UK because it was on our news and stuff like that. Like, it just seemed like it was 10 times worse for you guys.
Certainly the people supposedly in charge of our country, I think, did one of the worst jobs. I mean, in fairness, of course, obviously no one necessarily expected it, and obviously, all of that, but equally, just awful in this country. And I mean, obviously speaking to our fellow Australian singer-songwriter recently, obviously Ed Barnes, who I know you know, and obviously listeners may recognise from the podcast that's just come out last week. Of course, I know, talking around Australian politics with Ed, and my limited knowledge, I mean, I recognise as well, I think, whilst our leaders were pretty bad, yours wasn't much better necessarily either, from what I understand. So
he did such a bad job. He could have cured cancer and people still would have hated him. Like, that's the general consensus.
I think we definitely need some fresh ideas politically across the world, not just in our countries, but there's a lot of countries that are struggling there. And of course, the pandemic was tough times for us all, and of course, for a working musician such as yourself, I mean, there's never going to be a good time for a pandemic to hit. But I mean, obviously, as far as your work, it's pretty much, I guess, cut your work completely, I'd assume. So but equally, did it present an opportunity creatively? Did it allow you time to explore the journey that you're on, as you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I so in the aftermath, or just in the moment of realizing what was kind of happening, I saw a friend of mine in Melbourne put up a post saying, if anyone wants me to cover a song for like $20 or $30 or whatever, I'll do it for you, because none of us could work. And I was like, that's a really good idea. I'm gonna try and do that. And that kind of got me through for a bit. And then our government, I'm not sure if it was the same in the UK, I don't know, because your population's a lot larger. But the government came through and started to give us stimulus checks and stuff like that. So it wasn't as I qualified for it because I couldn't work. But it kind of just helped us live, scrape by, basically. I think it was like minimum wage payments.
Furlough, we called it.
And then that came in, so it kind of saved me, because it was still like, people were asking me to like learn songs I'd never heard of before, and I was trying to adapt them for like acoustic guitar. And it was a fun challenge, and my musicianship definitely benefited from it, but it was kind of time consuming. And so once that kind of subsided, I started to really get into like couldn't go anywhere. I was kind of in a lull with my songwriting as well. Like here and there, I'd be inspired to write something or get an idea down or something. But I started to really gravitate towards just written words, literature. I was doing some brain dumps and writing some poetry and stuff, and becoming inspired by a lot of different poets. And that was amazing as well, because like when I was younger, like a bit more less mature, I would kind of pass that stuff off. I was like, that's not cool. And now I love it. I guess this is growing up.
It is.
But and yeah, so it was an incredibly inspiring time for me creatively through the lockdown. And I'm a bit of an introvert anyway, so I wasn't that affected. I was still affected, but I wasn't that affected as, say, like an extrovert that was like, just like running up the walls out of insanity because they can't like talk to anyone, or like they have to do it on a Zoom call, which is like never the same thing. So I was kind of like relishing the time off in that respect. I could just like be in my own space and wake up and I had all this energy just to devote to being creative, as opposed to being sucked away into like the routine of the day, the expectations of the day and stuff like that. So that was amazing. And I've put together like, 50 to 60 brain dumps. I've been quite slow about it, but a lot of people, I put them on Instagram just as a caption for people to read to get some entertainment. And I've been quite slow, but a lot of people have asked me to turn into a book. So I'm getting there, but I've had other things to do. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
well, I do this sometimes. I ramble a bit, and
no, we love it
as they come through my head.
No, I love it. The podcast is about you, and certainly not about us. And I mean, I certainly look forward to if there's a book on the horizon. That would be fantastic. And yeah, we obviously don't need to stress about how horrible the pandemic was. It always feels like you have to caveat anything positive out of the pandemic by saying, of course, it was horrible, but on the podcast, I do love speaking to musicians that were able to find just a glimmer of hope and light in obviously the darkness of the pandemic. And often it is that time that it presented to creative types to be able to create, because they don't normally get the time to do that. And obviously it's fantastic to hear.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was good, and I'm working on trying to like bring that balance back. So working a bit less and having that time to be creative and work on some new music as well. Like not so much just written word, but like there's a lot more rules to writing music as opposed to just poetry. You got to work music into the equation. So
definitely.
I'll get there.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, and we look forward to obviously hearing what comes out. We have really enjoyed Days, Weeks, Months and Years, as we've said, obviously included on the podcast. If listeners are enjoying it, they can also of course check out a video for it on YouTube, which again I really enjoyed the video, to be fair. It's a bit of a lost art these days, so how did the concept come up?
I love that you asked this, because that the guy that directed it is a very good friend of mine. That's his job. Like he works for a little agency that does that kind of stuff. Their work was expanding into London, so he moved to London. So he's living in London now.
Nice.
And so that was, music videos have never really been a forte of mine. I never really have been like, I never write a song and be like, the next thing I think of is like, now I get to put a music video together, and just suddenly the ideas flow. It's kind of like, I suppose I should put a music together. Like, I suppose I should put a music video to this or something. All right, let's get it done. But with the help of Ian, who was an old bandmate of mine, who's the director, he was basically, he said, "I love you, man. I'm moving away. Before I move, let me do a music video for you. This is what I do. Let me do one for you. Thanks for the memories." So that was, we kind of just like situated it around like, this is my living space. It was all kind of around here. We organized like a little backyard party with some friends' bands that would play, and then I'd sing some songs and we get some footage. And I've never really been truly inspired about putting them together. So I really just sat down and I was like, okay, how do I put this together? And the whole thing is like, kind of feeling stuck, like feeling like you're missing out in life. So I was like, I got a Polaroid camera. I love taking that to parties and stuff like that, and making memories with like, just getting cute photos with friends and stuff. I love that. And I've got plenty. So how about I do something weird and stick them all over my body? the symbolism. It's a metaphor. And I really enjoyed getting a bit creative with that kind of stuff. The ironically the backyard party was like the most time consuming and stressful because it was raining. I had to go buy some tents to set up so people could actually enjoy themselves. Most time consuming, took the longest to shoot and everything, and then it's only in the music video for half a verse. And I was like, oh, okay. But it works. It works like that. It would be overkill if it was any more, I think. But yeah, it was just trying to capture that feeling of like, you know, appreciating your friends and feeling like you miss them because you're doing too many things, and that wanderlust feeling of like, you know, before COVID, I had a lot of things on the table like overseas, and then through COVID, those kind of dissipated for obvious reasons, and coming to terms with that as well. And yeah, I kind of wanted to portray that through a video. So I did put a bit of effort into brainstorming the ideas, and then Ian was able to perfectly capture what I was trying to explain to him, who doesn't speak the lingo. And I think that's what a good director does as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an incredible. I can safely say, because I didn't really have a part in the editing or the shooting or anything, I can say I also think it's an incredible video because Ian's amazing.
Yeah, no, Ian has done a fantastic job at bringing the obviously ideas to life that you had, and listeners very much need to go and check it out. And I'm sure we'll have obviously the links for it in the bio of the episode. If you're listening and you want to click through and watch that now, then please do enjoy. So obviously the track came out with, you know, a handful of songs as part of an EP. So obviously, again, listeners, you can find it on Spotify and all your usual streaming platforms. So Blake, how would you describe, again, if we've got some listeners checking this out who, you know, stumbled across it, who's this Blake person? Why is he talking to Full Pelt Music? You know, how would you describe the EP to someone unfamiliar with yourself?
Well, it was an EP by accident because I didn't realize that Spotify would classify four songs as an EP. So it's mainly just the A side, and then the other three are track 2 has already been released like prior. And it's just a technique that people do, like they call it waterfalling, where they put the previous single as a second track, and then it kind of just, if you're new to the artist, you are already like the previous song is already pushed in front of you, that kind of thing. And then the third track is I did some live acoustic sessions with a friend of mine that just getting a home studio up and running. So he gave me like a very discounted rate, which was awesome. And I just needed some live things. I just wanted to have that thing. In my previous band, it was, this is all part of the sound. I'm not saying this in a bad way. This is just how things go in those like slick modern songs. My previous band was like a pop punky kind of band, and the producer we worked with, like everything was sounded perfect and edited and stuff like that. Like my vocals were tuned to 100% and stuff like that. And I was surprised when I saw him doing it. I was like, oh, okay, all right. I guess that's how it goes. He's a producer. This guy's like a very well-known producer in Australia. So I won't say anything, but it kind of wasn't really what I wanted to do with my voice. So as a knee-jerk reaction, I went and did some live takes and wanted to get some, just to prove, I know I can sing in tune, but like to prove, it was like, here, these are live. The acoustic is bleeding into the vocal mic. You can't tune this. This is how I sound. Yeah. That kind of thing. And that's not to take away from this producer we work with. He's amazing. And the results show from his work. Anyway, so I wanted to put I've got 4 of those. So in the next song, I'll put another one on. The next release will have another one of those little bonus tracks. And then I wrote a song about my cat, which is the 4th track, who I absolutely fell in love with. I just before all the lockdowns, I started dating this girl, and she got a rescue cat from just a rescue center. Yeah. This tiny, timid little 3-month-old cat. And I always thought I was a dog person until I started hanging out with this cat, and I realized our personalities are very, very similar. And I've still got him. Like we're no longer together. She's moved to Canada and she's living over there, and we're still friends and everything. But I'm full custody cat dad now. Yeah. And I wrote a song about him. It's called
Oh,
Rocky.
beautiful, beautiful. And yeah, I mean, I've always thought of myself as more of well, I've definitely always thought of myself as a dog person. We've had a cat come into the family recently, and you know, hopefully my wife won't watch this, but actually, yeah, I can get on with him. So
Yeah. It's an
yeah.
adjustment after a dog. I've never owned a dog, but I've just, you know, more of my mental real estate has been towards them, because
Mm.
cats, you need just a cat on the street, like it's going to be very wary and you know, standoffish, and which is completely understandable once you get to know cats. But dogs, it's just like a new person, new friend. Oh my god! Like, what do you smell like? Do you have any food? Do you want to play? Like that kind of stuff. And that energy is quite, you know, nice. It's endearing. I find dogs are very complimenting to the human ego, which
Yeah,
is great. And cats are just like, fuck off, don't touch me.
exactly.
Or it's dinner time, you can touch me.
Yeah, that does describe our cat down to a T. Yeah, no, fantastic. And obviously, again, listeners, obviously, if you want to check this out, head over to Spotify or any of the streaming sites, of course. And it's a good sort of just reference point, obviously, to introduce yourselves to Blake's music, and obviously see what's on offer. So, with this new music you've put out, we always end up touching quite often on social media because it dominates our lives these days. So how have you found? Yeah, how have you found the reaction to the music you've put out? And do you really analyze and monitor, the feedback in the comments and everything, or do you try and avoid that?
The busier I get, the less I pay attention to it. I think, and the more songs I put out and the more used to I am, more familiar I get with the release process, the less I tend to nitpick about that kind of thing. I rarely get negative feedback. That's not to say that my stuff is like amazing and everyone's gonna love it, but I think most of the people in my friendship circles are old enough to not be petty like that. If they don't like it, they're not going to tell me. They're not going to be a dick about it. But I used to be very paying attention to it and very strict with what goes up when, and there's certain times of day where more people are using social media where it makes sense to post something. And that'll in turn help with the algorithm and all that stuff. But it's very exhausting trying to keep up with that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I find the more I learn or the more time I devote to that, the less exercise I give my creative, less I can flex my creative mind, I guess. So it becomes this frustration, this exhausting dichotomy between keeping up to date with technology and fulfilling, being a good creative, being a good songwriter. So I find that exhausting. Like splitting the left and right side of the brain is very annoying to have to do, and unfortunately it's very necessary. And trying to wrap your head around stuff like TikTok or Reels on Instagram and stuff, and being a content creator, it's like I just want to write music.
Yeah,
why do I have to do this? I don't have to, but it seems to be like the way to go if you want more people to hear your music.
Yeah.
Which I do, I guess. I want, I think that's one of my goals that I found out I kind of clicked onto during lockdowns upon my my abundant time to self-reflect, is if I can have the same effect, I've came across so many songwriters that had such a profound effect on me with their music and just who they are as people. It's quite a pivotal moment for me, and I guess I just came to the conclusion if I can have that same effect on someone, some people, the same way that my favorite songwriters had an effect on me, that would be, that's success to me. I would be the most successful person in the world if that's what I can do. So torn between getting more people to hear my music and giving myself enough time to write good music.
Yeah, it's that is the dilemma for everyone, but it's a lovely philosophy and idea, like you say, to try and obviously have that impact. And social media, I'm not necessarily a fan. I always feel so old. Like you say, TikTok. Don't get it. I don't understand it whatsoever. But of course, you have to do these things. But obviously, you've kind of, as we've said, come across the singer-songwriter, folk punk kind of genre, which I always hate having to pigeonhole everything into a genre, but again, that's a bit like social media. It feels like a necessity. You have to have this label so people know what to, where to put you on which shelf and everything. But
sorry, go
on.
No,
you go.
I was going to say, I often get asked in interviews or whatever. Usually, like when someone like puts up an interview for me, like the written question is like, "What do you sound like?" And it's like, fuck, do I have to answer that? Can't you just listen? I hate trying to pigeonhole myself. Like, I'm this and I sound like this, and you better hear this when I sing. Like, no, just make it up. It's music, it's art, it's subjective. Make up your own mind. Have some autonomy.
100%. You're Blake Cateris, so that's who you are. You don't need to have all these other labels put on. But I mean, I was talking to obviously Ed Barnes, as we said, who was on the last podcast, and of course, similar kind of influences that we were discussing, for him, and obviously some artists you mentioned, obviously the UK scene for this type of music, and it exploded over here. Probably about 10-15 years ago, and obviously just continue to get bigger, and there's quite a lot of famous artists that play this type of music now, and obviously do very, very well. But talking to Ed, it's a bit of a burgeoning kind of new kind of scene in Australia, I understand. I don't know what your thoughts are on the genesis of it over there and how it's going.
Well, it's definitely, I mean, there's only 25 million people in this country, so and we all live so far away from each other.
True. Yeah.
So like to get from Sydney to Melbourne it's a 9-hour drive, or like an hour and a half plane flight. So the population densities are so far away. So touring is it's a much different story over here. It's not really a thing. Like a national tour, you can get away with like playing 5 dates or something, or not even like 3 dates really. So in that respect, it's the landscape, the musical landscape is a lot different. And it's probably, I mean, I haven't been to the UK since I was 10 years old, so I can't speak for it yet. But I can imagine with your population, naturally, that would make your music scene a lot more busy, a lot more thriving in that respect. But lately, I have kind of noticed there's a lot more people willing to kind of ditch the crappy little. Not crappy. How do I say this without? There's like a lot of like just like an obsession with the 80s for a bit, and all the good and awful things that came with that era of music. And people have kind of, especially in my age, my demographic, have kind of like got over that and trying to paying a bit more attention to the music, which is amazing. I love that, and the quality of music's going up, and there's a bit more respect. The music scene, if you can call it that, is a lot more. It's a lot healthier. There's a lot more support from everyone, and there's a lot more freedom and encouragement from everyone around you to be who you want to be, basically, which is amazing.
Yeah.
With the younger, like, I don't know how it is with radio in the UK, but we kind of have like one radio station to rule them all. One radio station to rule all of. Sorry, I've had 3 days off, and I just watched Lord of the Rings, so that was. There's one radio station that acts as a kind of like tastemaker. There's a bit of a bottleneck to the audience of kids and young people that like current music, called Triple J, and they've got a 3-hour segment on Wednesday nights called Short Fast Loud, and it's just for punk and hardcore, which is great. And I've come across so many new favorite Aussie bands that way. And my old band's been featured on a couple of times, which is great. The presenters that trade seats every week are great and very supportive of that kind of stuff. So we have places for it, but it's just not as prevalent as I can imagine it would be in the UK.
Yeah, no, but it's fantastic to hear that it's developing, which is just great to hear. And the word I picked up on, obviously, when you talked about the UK, was the word "yet." I believe there is thoughts and plans trying to be made for you to be able to come across. So again, if someone's listening to this podcast in the UK and is like, I really enjoyed the single, and hey, I'd like to catch Blake at a show sometime, what are the rough timescales? What are you working to be able to come across to the UK? What kind of plans do you have?
So Ed and I have been working hard to put together a UK tour, and we've been reaching out to like a lot of songwriters around the country that we have come across that we like, asking for either to play a show with us or help us out and stuff like that. And the response has been quite welcoming, like very surprising. Kind of like, two strangers reaching out from the other side of the world, like, I've got better things to do. But a lot of people were, very, very open and helpful and that kind of stuff. So we've got, I think we've got 8 or 9 shows so far. More to. We're working on more. But we're coming over in April. So the first show is in Colchester on the 6th of April. And then we're wrapping up in Brighton on the 23rd of April. So in between then, we're trying to fit in as many shows as possible and see as much of the country as we can. Because I'm 29 now, so it's been 19 years since I've been to I reckon a lot has changed since then.
Certainly has.
Yeah, so that's pretty much been taking up most of our time the past couple of months, putting that all together. And I'm looking forward to coming.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to having you. And yeah, I mean, it's just a fantastic story. Again, obviously the scene that we're trying to pigeonhole you into, it features such an incredible DIY like ethos, and obviously you and Ed, getting in touch with fellow musicians over here and seeing if you can hop on show, and it just it's just that organic kind of situation that brews there, and I love to hear it.
It was very wholesome. Well, it was heartwarming how open people were with it, because, as I said, like, they didn't have to. Like, everyone's got their own like they've got their schedule and their plans, and two strangers from the other side of the world doesn't necessarily fit in with a lot of other people's plans. But people were very open and willing to give us their time, which is great.
Yeah, no, it is fantastic, and obviously, listeners that want to have a chance to come along. I mean, obviously, we touched on social media already. That's a good way to stay up to date with everyone, and they can follow you, Blake, on Instagram and Twitter at Blake Cateris, and on Facebook at B Cateris. You've got your own website as well, of course, which listeners can get to from the links.
I try and use that as like a hub for everything. Like, I put my shows on there, and all that kind of stuff. At the moment, because the tour, and we've got like a little Australian tour, and by Australian tour, like I said before, it's 3 dates. So we have that at the end of February, and it's all being announced together. So the Australian tour and the UK tour are going to be announced together. And I also have, which is sick, I don't know if you're aware of a band called Body Jar from Australia, a 90s 2000s punk band. Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's okay. They're like a little gem within Australia, but I don't think they really touch much outside the country. But I'm doing a cruise with them, like a little harbour cruise, like just an afternoon. I'm playing some acoustic guitar. There's a bunch of other bands and punk bands and stuff like that. It'll be a cool little thing. So I'm doing that, and then actually a month before that, Me First and the Gimme Gimmes are coming through Australia, and DJ Ramon is the bass player, so he's doing a separate show, and the promoter asked me to do a little solo set opening up, so that's cool.
Definitely.
Those kind of things are on the table as well, and because they're on my website, they're announced. I try and use the website as a little hub. But everyone kind of uses social media, so
but the shout out is blakecateris.com. And the link will be in the bio again, so listeners obviously do head along there, and obviously do follow Blake on social media, as we all should do these days. Follow everyone on social media because it's just so important. But obviously can't wait to get you across to the UK. Absolutely fantastic, and I've got my eye on that Colchester show that you mentioned already, which should be a great night. So we're heading towards the end of the podcast, the final section, because we talk about the live side of the industry. We move on to what we call setlist science. So I'm a bit of a setlist geek, and I always ask the question of, how much attention do you pay to the structure of your set lists, and have you got any rules that you tend to follow?
I think one of the this is kind of just something I was told really young, and I'm not, and it's just kind of just a widely accepted thing, is I don't open or close with a cover. I think like general consensus is if you're going to do a cover, it's like second song or like second last song. I don't know why. I think it's just like, I think at a local level, if you're doing a cover, that song is going to be a stronger song than most of your set lists. So you you save it, and then you save your best song for last or something. You open with your second best song and close with your best song or something like that. That kind of thing. With the solos thing, like I'm still getting a set list together. And as my career, moves along, you weed out the weaker songs or the less relevant songs, that kind of thing. I find stupidly when I write songs, I've been singing, I've been, in this session for a couple of hours, I'm nice and warmed up. So the parts I tend to write become very demanding vocally. So stupidly, my fault. Amateur, you get that on a bit of an amateur in that respect. So frustratingly, like when I go and play a show, I have to make sure like I save those songs for like, somewhere in the middle towards the end where I'm a bit more warmed up. So I've got a couple of songs that work well opening up where I can just kind of like just roll into them and use them as a warm up and stuff like that. And then kind of feed into the more demanding ones. Days, weeks, months, and years is quite demanding because there's no real breaks, room for breath, especially in the bridge towards the end with the chorus and stuff. So I try and save that for towards the end because it's just so demanding. And I kind of cater towards that. I cater towards my voice because I think it's better to deliver the song properly, and not wreck my voice or like not give the impression to the audience like, oh, this guy doesn't know how to sing. Like, why? What the fuck? This guy sucks. So I make sure like I give my voice whatever chance it needs to get to the point where it can handle the song that I'm singing. So I'll usually save. There's a couple of songs that are a bit more demanding. I'll save them towards the end.
Yeah, and that is the science that I love to hear about because, of course, there's tailoring the set list to make sure it works for the crowd. But of course, that's the side that the people in the crowd probably aren't thinking about is the artist having to tailor it to themselves, obviously, and quite often it is the singer, and obviously I can't sing them two songs back to back, and no, this one needs to be further on, and it's really interesting as a bit of a set list geek to always hear that and have that conversation. So fantastic. Just to the last little section that we've been adding on recently. In the UK, we've got something called Independent Venue Week happening in about a week's time. So we've been asking everyone we've interviewed just to throw a shout out to a local independent venue of theirs. And hey, it's not just the UK that these venues are incredibly important to. They're important across the world and of course in Australia. So what venue would you like to give a shout out to?
That's like asking a musician, like, what's your favorite song? Like, there's so many. Off the top of my head, there's one that's kind of like been a very good, decent, like filled a decent hole for Sydney, especially. First of all, I'll give a shout out to one that has recently closed. There's a bar called Frankie's Pizza that I had a residency at for 9 years, and then naturally Sydney needs more train stations, so they knocked it down, and which is fucked. But all the business people, they need to get to work on time, so they had to make way. But there's one in Newtown, which is like our fun, trendy, cool area, and it's just this strip. Well, it's these two streets. They kind of fork, and it's probably about a 1 kilometer stretch of road, and there's just bars, restaurants, cool stuff. Lots of music venues. So that's Newtown, and that's our cool little area. There's a bar there called the Duke, which is right next to a very big music venue. Like, I don't know, I think it's like 2,500 people or something. But it's been recently taken over by someone and turned into they've just given it a makeover and turned it into this cool little dive bar, really. And that's kind of the cool, and it's it's free entry. It's not like a club where you have to pay to get in. It's just you walk in, sink a few beers. There's always going to be music, and you don't know what you're going to get, and that's it's part of the excitement. Actually, the other day, so Beans on Toast was touring through Australia. I went to see his show. We ended up at the Duke, and he kicked my ass at pool. So at the Duke. So there's that little story. But yeah, that was a cool show. It was cool to see Beans do a headline show.
Yeah.
And then yeah, embarrassingly get my ass kicked.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the Duke. I'll give a shout out to the Duke. I reckon that's a cool little place.
Yeah, excellent. And yeah, these venues are so vital for musicians and for fans, across the world. So yeah, definitely we always want to try and give a spotlight on them. And obviously, a spotlight on yourself, Blake. Then, what would be your final message for the listeners today?
A final message.
Yeah, pressure here.
Yeah, I know. This is. I got stumped. So sometimes I get asked. It's like if you could say anything to like young or that kind of like those kind of things. I kind of like out of the pressure, I came up with this diamond. That was I was like really stumped and I was sweating. I was like I was not expecting this question. Naturally, I didn't know what the questions were, but I was not expecting this one. I was like, if I could give any advice to a younger musician or my younger self or something like that, it'd be make sure that whatever achievements you receive or you create for yourself, make sure that you've earned them, make sure that you've done the work and it comes from your own hard work and skill. Because if you're just handed things like I don't know whether it's like nepotism or anything. There's that new term like nepo baby.
Yeah,
that just came across recently. But yeah, I'm not. How do I say this without being a bit jaded? Make sure you earn it yourself. Go out and do it yourself. Put in the work, and that way it's yours, and no one can take it away from you. As opposed to being handed everything, and then one day they're like, "Oh no, we've changed our mind. All right, well let's just take that back. No, you can't have that anymore." And your success is dependent on someone else's willingness to facilitate it. So if it comes from you and you've earned it, doesn't matter if you don't become the archetype of musician, like the most famous person in the world. Like that's as long as you're happy doing what you're doing, and you've earned it yourself. That's the most admirable way to live your life, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Very, very deep. And yeah, happiness is the key there, for sure. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you, Blake. And we can't wait, of course, for you to come across to the UK. Obviously, listeners need to make sure they do check out, obviously, Days, Weeks, Months and Years. And yeah, obviously, follow you on social media. Head to blakecateris.com. Find a show in Australia or in the UK and pop along and see it. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on.
Man, Paul, thanks for having me. Thanks for giving me your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for listening. I really do hope you enjoyed that chat there with Blake Cateris. Make sure you check out his song Days, Weeks, Months and Years over on our Discover New Music playlist on Spotify. And of course, follow Blake across social media. You can also follow Full Pelt on social media. We're on Facebook at Full Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Full Pelt Music. Finally, if you would, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, because we will be back very soon with another episode of the Discover New Music podcast.